So an Australian friend of mine called me recently and said, "Hey Andrew, I'm going to be in Singapore. I know you bank in Singapore, and can you help me open my offshore bank account? I'm going to be there." So I gave him some advice, told him what to do, told him where to go. He called me afterwards and said, "Hey Andrew, they wouldn't open my account." I'm going to tell you what he did wrong, and I'm going to tell you specifically how to open an offshore bank account in almost any situation in this video. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson, and if you want to open an offshore bank account, there's a few things that you need to know. My friend who was visiting Singapore ran into a few issues that could have easily been avoided. What you have to understand about offshore banking is that there are several different types of offshore bank accounts and that there are several different ways to go about opening them. But the first thing to understand is banking offshore is really not that much different than banking onshore. Throw in the word offshore and people imagine some great level of mysticism, like there's some incredibly complicated structure that has to be followed, kind of like photography becoming wedding photography and tripling in price. The reality for most people is that you can walk into a bank and open an account, you can download an app and open an account, or you can open an account what's called remotely through correspondence. Let's talk about going into a bank and opening an account. In a lot of countries that are just real countries, they have real economies, you can simply walk into a bank. I made a video here on YouTube about opening a bank account in Georgia. You don't need an appointment, you don't need an introduction, you can just go to the bank and you can walk in and say, "Hey, I'd like to open an account." You have your passport, you have your address, and they will help you open an account. Now, obviously, some physical banks require you to have an appointment. If you're going to open a private banking account or a priority banking account, you may well want an appointment. If you're opening an account in a traditional offshore center like the Cayman Islands, they may not take walk-ins at all. But if you're going to one of these countries that's just a regular country, Hong Kong, Georgia, any number of other places, you can call the bank and say, "Hey, do you accept foreigners? I don't have a residence permit, don't have a work permit, I'm not living there, but I'm going to be visiting. Let me come in and open an account." A lot of banks and a lot of countries in recent years have cracked down on this because of ever stricter know your customer rules. The banks are de-risking and they don't want to take people who are a risk, which is why countries like Singapore now want you to put $200,000 in most cases versus $1,000. For $200,000, it's worth their time to check into you. For $1,000, it's not. But once you've identified a country where you can just walk in, the best thing you have to keep in mind is you want to look professional. You want to know why you're going to open the account, and you want to have all the particulars about your situation. So the bank is going to ask you, where do you pay tax? Are you a U.S. taxpayer? What do you want the account for? What do you plan to do with the account? What's your initial deposit? Those are all standard questions that they're going to ask you. If you are like, "Hey, yeah, I'm coming to Singapore because I hear like you don't have any tax in your bank accounts and I can like put my money here," like they're not going to open an account. If you show up as my friend did, in a ratty looking t-shirt, a lot of banks, particularly in Asia, may not open you an account. And so there's a variable when it comes to opening an offshore bank account in person where a lot of times you have to deal with the bureaucracy. Banks can be just as bad as the government, where if you happen to be unlucky and you get the person who's new and who says, "Oh yeah, no, we don't take people in that situation," you may just need to come back. That's why I often recommend going to the main branch of the bank. You don't want to go to some suburban branch where they have, Sally sitting in a desk and she's just used to people bringing in and depositing checks for their construction business. You want to go to the main branch where people maybe have some idea of how things work in terms of the bank's real policies. Because the reality is any bank employee can just say, yeah, we don't do that. They may be wrong, but if that's the bank employee you get, then you'll either have to come back later or just give up entirely. So understanding why you want the account, having your address, having your passport, having all the details of your situation is going to be very important. And so again, you can call the bank, you can figure out what's required, what documents they want, if they accept people in your situation, and if they want you to make an appointment, you can do that in advance. My team at Nomad Capitalist, we keep a list of like 425 different banks, and we update it on a constant basis of which banks are accepting which people, what's the deposit. That information is constantly changing. banks are constantly saying, yeah, we're not taking US citizens anymore. Yeah, no more expats. One bank in Singapore said, we're not taking UK citizens. So no one video can cover that all, but if you follow the basics, you can just work with the banks and figure out and then use that protocol to walk in and open the account in person. That's for a personal account. If you want a business account, of course, you need the details on the business. Now, remote account opening. I made a video on that. You can check it out here as well, where I talked about how this is falling out of favor with me because of all the KYC, because of how difficult it is to do that remotely. But a lot of people have an interest, from what they've researched on the offshore industry over the years, of just filling out some forms from an offshore bank in Belize, Caymans, Cook Islands, Vanuatu, whatever. They fill out the forms. They send a notarized copy of their passport. They send some of their documentation to the bank, and the bank basically does everything that they would do in the branch, but they do it with you sitting at home on your sofa. The challenge with this is it's going to take them longer in many cases. The banks are going to have higher fees. I talk about all that in my remote account opening video. But that's certainly an option. If you don't want to go to the bank, you can open an account in some of these offshore jurisdictions, and there's going to be more paperwork. It's going to be more expensive, but you can save yourself the trip. The new thing that is attracting a lot of attention from folks are these fintech solutions, whether it's Neat in Hong Kong, whether it's LuPay, whether it's Bunk. There are a lot of these, Revolut, a lot of these new kind of app-based banks. I think these are very interesting. The challenge that I have with these app-based banks, as easy as they seem, is that, number one, in some cases they're only open to certain people. So certain apps are only open to EU citizens or residents. So that excludes a lot of people. And if you're trying to be tax optimized, being an EU resident may not be the best thing to be. So that excludes some of them. But I also have a problem with these apps is that besides some of the stability concerns people have brought up, I'm not necessarily sure I believe all of that, but these accounts have closed people down. I look at these accounts as being rather similar to online bank accounts that you'd have in like the United States. I had an account with Ally Bank once in the United States, and I'd been logging in from overseas a lot because I was living overseas. And eventually they sent me an email saying, we're closing your account and we're sending you a check for the balance. And I had about $250,000 in the account. And they sent it to some old address. They said, well, we couldn't verify the address that you gave us most recently, so we just sent it to the previous address, which was a house that at that point I'd sold like 2 years earlier. And so I had to frantically call the people who bought the house from me. I had to call the real estate agent. I had him call and like track this thing down and put a stop payment on it. And they weren't really very helpful because they don't understand, like, you're in Romania or what? So it was a real stressful thing. Now, that's not a fintech account. That's just an online bank account. But these new app-based accounts, to me, are just not as robust. I understand that a lot of people like them. They are easy to use. You can send them money. The fees are lower. For me, opening an offshore bank account isn't saving a few bucks on fees. I have an ATM card that lets me withdraw anywhere fee-free, and I pay spot rate on withdrawals. But that's not really my main purpose. And so if you're looking for kind of a basic offshore bank account, you want to park some money, these new app-based solutions can work for you. And it's just a matter of going and downloading the app, scanning a copy of your passport in many cases. In one case, I think we tested out Bunk, and you have to do like a live chat with them, and you've got to show the passport in front of your face, and the woman shouted at me, and it was just very difficult. So for me, I like the traditional banks where you just go in, you open an account. All these accounts are increasingly becoming more difficult because governments are making it more difficult to move your money. Governments are demanding that banks know their customer more than ever. They're making sure that information is being shared to where a lot of banks don't want to open accounts, not just for Americans, but for people who are tax resident anywhere outside of their jurisdiction. But hopefully that gives you kind of an introductory primer to what you need to do if you're going in person and what you need to do if you're doing it through correspondence. And we have a lot more videos on offshore banking here on our channel, so if you're new to this idea and you want to figure out more specific solutions, definitely check those out as well. I'm Andrew Henderson, and if you're looking for a way to legally reduce your taxes, build your freedom, and create wealth faster as a global citizen, then you've come to the right place.
I want you to do 3 things right now. Number 1, click the button to subscribe to our channel. Make sure to get notifications so you never miss a new video. Number 2, get a copy of our #1 best-selling book, Nomad Capitalist, on Amazon and learn all of the dozens of benefits of our lifestyle. And number 3, if you're already a 6 or 7-figure entrepreneur and you want to put these strategies in place, go to nomadcapitalist.com and find out how to get some help.